Most people believe power is loud. They are wrong. True power is silent. It doesn't chase, it doesn't explain, it doesn't beg to be understood. This dark psychological story explores Machiavelli's unspoken truth, the kind of mental dominance that comes not from control, but from detachment. He learned early that silence makes people nervous. Not the awkward kind, the deliberate kind. The kind where you say nothing, yet somehow the room feels smaller. At 12 years old, he sat across from his father at a narrow kitchen table in Queens, New York. The man's hands were rough, permanently stained with engine oil. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had obeyed too many rules written by men he would never meet. "You think too much," his father said, staring at him over a chipped mug. "That's dangerous." The boy didn't respond. He had already learned something his father never would. When you speak, you reveal position. When you remain silent, others project theirs. The boy's name was Elias Crow. At school, teachers called him intelligent but distant. Students called him strange, never to his face. Elias had no interest in being liked. He was interested in patterns. Who talked when nervous? Who laughed to mask insecurity? Who needed approval to function? By 15, he could predict arguments before they started. By 18, he could provoke them without being blamed. He didn't manipulate, he positioned. That distinction would matter later. At 24, Elias discovered Machiavelli by accident. A used bookstore, a cracked spine, the prince wedged between outdated economics textbooks. He didn't read it like others did. Most people read Machiavelli searching for tactics. Elias read him searching for temperature. Fear had a temperature. Love had one too. Distance, when applied correctly, froze everything. Machiavelli wasn't cold, he was precise. And precision, Elias realized, was the highest form of cruelty. By 30, Elias had built a reputation without building a persona. No social media presence, no unnecessary opinions, no visible ambition. Yet somehow rooms adjusted when he entered. People spoke more carefully, laughed a little less, explained themselves more. They didn't know why. Elias did. Humans fear unpredictability, but they worship restraint. He gave them nothing to grab onto. The first real test came during the merger. 2 companies, millions on the line, executives circling like predators pretending to be diplomats. Elias wasn't the CEO. He wasn't even the loudest voice in the room. He was the man everyone looked at after speaking. A subtle habit, unconscious, but revealing. When tension rose, Elias leaned back. When accusations flew, he remained still. When egos clashed, he asked one question, softly. What outcome are we protecting here? Silence. Not confusion, calculation. By the end of the meeting, the decision matched his unspoken preference. No argument, no resistance. Power does not demand, it frames. That night, Elias stood alone on his apartment balcony overlooking the city. Lights flickered like signals from lives he would never touch. He thought of Machiavelli's warning. Men should either be caressed or crushed. But Machiavelli never finished the thought. There was a third option. Withdraw. When you remove emotional access, people collapse inward. They negotiate with themselves. They reveal weakness trying to regain relevance. Distance wasn't absence. It was pressure without fingerprints.
Elias didn't hate people. That was the misconception. Hate required emotional investment. He simply understood them. And understanding, true understanding, creates an asymmetry few can tolerate. The woman would be the first to notice. Her name was Claire Monroe. Brilliant, charismatic, dangerously perceptive. She sensed something in Elias that unsettled her. Not threat, but immunity. He didn't react to charm, didn't flinch at authority, didn't chase validation. For the first time in years, Claire felt exposed, and exposure to the powerful feels like an insult. She would test him. Others would follow, and Elias would learn the final Machiavellian truth. Mental dominance isn't about controlling people, it's about making control irrelevant. The game had begun long before anyone realized they were playing, and no one, not even Elias, would leave unchanged. Silence had become his reputation. Power does not begin with control. It begins with detachment. Elias understood this the night he realized that emotions are the only doors people leave unlocked. He was 32 when the insomnia began, not the restless kind, but the quiet, observant kind. The kind where your body sleeps, but your mind stands guard, watching thoughts like strangers passing under a street lamp. He lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe. Cars, sirens, voices fading into anonymity. Civilization was nothing more than a shared hallucination reinforced by routine. Machiavelli would have appreciated that. People believed order existed because it was moral. Elias knew it existed because it was useful, and usefulness never cared about truth. Claire Monroe entered his life without permission. She didn't announce herself. She never did. She simply appeared where influence accumulated. Boardrooms, private dinners, strategic silences between sentences. She was the kind of woman who made men speak faster, as if afraid time would expose them. Claire didn't rush Elias. That was her first mistake. Most people, when they encounter resistance, escalate. Claire observed. She watched how Elias listened, not passively, but selectively. He didn't absorb words, he filtered intentions. He responded late, if at all, allowing discomfort to mature in the space between question and answer. Discomfort was honest, words were not. "You don't offer much," she said once, during a late meeting that had already ended for everyone else. Elias didn't look at her immediately. "I offer exactly what's required," he replied. Her smile froze, not vanished, just paused. Interesting, she thought. Men usually tried to impress her. Elias behaved as if she were already impressed and irrelevant. That night, Claire replayed the conversation in her apartment, glass of wine untouched. Why did it bother her? He hadn't insulted her, hadn't challenged her authority, hadn't dismissed her competence. He had done something far more unsettling. He had not reacted. Reaction is the currency of dominance. Without it, power has nothing to feed on. Elias walked home instead of taking a car. He did this often. Movement cleared emotional residue. Machiavelli warned that rulers who rely on love are fragile, but he never explained why. Elias had filled in the gap years ago. Love creates expectation. Expectation creates leverage. Fear does the same, but faster. Distance, however, creates uncertainty, and uncertainty forces the mind inward. People begin negotiating with themselves. They supply meaning where none exists. That was the true mechanism of control, not action, but absence. He passed a homeless man arguing with someone who wasn't there. Most would look away. Elias stopped. The man's words weren't nonsense. They were unfiltered logic, without social editing. "Everyone wants something," the man said, suddenly, locking eyes with Elias. "They just pretend they don't." Elias nodded. "That's why they're easy to move," he replied. The man laughed, a raw, broken sound. "Then what do you want?" Elias didn't answer. He walked away. Some questions don't deserve a response. Others gain power by remaining unanswered. The next confrontation came subtly. Claire didn't confront Elias directly. She applied pressure, the refined kind. She questioned his recommendations in meetings, redirected credit, created narrative friction. She wanted a reaction. Elias gave her none. He adjusted nothing, explained nothing. He let outcomes speak. Within weeks, her objections aligned with his conclusions, not intentionally, but inevitably. People mistake coincidence for competence. Elias allowed them to. This was the danger Machiavelli hinted at, but never named. When people believe they're choosing freely, they surrender more completely. True dominance doesn't feel imposed. It feels discovered. Late one evening, Claire confronted him. No audience, no witnesses. "Do you enjoy this?" she asked. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Do you enjoy what?" "Observing people orbit you without knowing why?" A pause. "Orbit implies gravity," Elias said calmly. "I don't pull, people fall." "That's semantics." "No," he corrected, "it's mechanics." She studied him now, not as a rival, but as a variable. "You don't fear losing influence," she said. "That's what makes you dangerous." Elias met her gaze. "I fear dependence," he replied. "Influence survives without attachment." That was the moment Claire understood. He wasn't playing for position, he was playing for immunity. Power usually reveals itself in desire. Desire to win, to be seen, to dominate. Elias desired nothing visible, and what cannot be seen cannot be attacked. That night, Elias opened his old copy of The Prince, margins filled with notes, questions, corrections. Machiavelli had been honest, but incomplete. He assumed rulers wanted to rule. Elias didn't. He wanted freedom from consequence, a state where actions ripple outward, but nothing ripples back. That was mental dominance. He wrote a single line in the margin: "The ultimate power is to be unreachable." Claire would test this theory soon. So would others. Because when people sense an asymmetry they can't explain, they attempt to restore balance. Sometimes with charm, sometimes with aggression, sometimes with betrayal. Elias was prepared, not because he anticipated their moves, but because he had removed his need to respond. And in that removal, he had become something rare, untouchable. Silence deepened around him, not emptiness, but density. The kind that bends decisions, the kind that alters outcomes without leaving evidence. The city continued its noise, the world continued its chaos, but Elias had stepped outside the storm, and from there he could see everything.
Every system reveals itself under pressure. Elias learned this long before he learned people. Systems pretend to be moral. They are not. They are efficient, or they collapse. Morality is a story told to those who need comfort. Power is a structure built by those who need results. Machiavelli understood this. What he didn't say out loud was why people hate those who see it clearly. Because clarity destroys excuses. The first betrayal arrived quietly. It always does. Not through hostility, but through familiarity. It came from Marcus Hale. Marcus was competent, ambitious, desperate to be seen. Those three traits rarely coexist peacefully. Marcus had risen fast, faster than his judgment. He admired Elias the way insecure men admire mountains, with reverence mixed with resentment. He wanted proximity. Proximity, he believed, would transfer power. That belief would undo him. Elias noticed the shift before the act. The way Marcus spoke Elias's ideas aloud, slightly altered. The way he interrupted, not to challenge, but to claim momentum. The way his tone changed when authority entered the room. People reveal their intentions long before they act. They rehearse. Claire noticed too. "You should watch him," she said once, not as a warning, but as an observation. Elias nodded. "I am," he replied. She frowned. "No, you're not doing anything." That's the point. Betrayal is ineffective when it has no emotional target. Marcus believed Elias would retaliate, expose him, crush him. That would have been predictable. Predictability is a form of surrender. Instead, Elias did something colder. He withdrew clarity. Meetings became shorter. Feedback became neutral. Guidance vanished. Marcus felt it immediately. Without Elias's silent alignment, his ideas lost cohesion. Without resistance, his ambition had nothing to sharpen against. He began over-explaining, overreaching, over-committing. An unsupported climber falls faster than one who is pushed. Machiavelli wrote that men are quicker to offend one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. He was right, but he underestimated something. Men are quickest to destroy one who makes himself irrelevant, because irrelevance is humiliation without insult. Marcus finally made his move, a calculated presentation, selective data, a subtle implication that Elias's strategies were outdated. The room listened. Elias remained still. When it ended, no one looked at Marcus. They looked at Elias. Not because Elias had spoken, but because he had not. Silence had become his reputation. And reputation, once established, speaks louder than defense. Elias broke it with a single sentence. "Let's test it." No accusation, no denial. Just a process. The system did the rest. Weeks later, the numbers came in. Marcus's model collapsed under real conditions. Elias's quietly absorbed the shock. No blame was assigned. No apology requested. Marcus was reassigned, not punished. Displaced. Displacement is more effective than destruction. Destruction creates martyrs. Displacement creates ghosts. That night, Elias sat alone, lights off, city glowing below. He thought about cruelty. People misunderstand it. Cruelty isn't violence. It isn't anger. Cruelty is precision without mercy. It is allowing someone to fail using their own momentum. Machiavelli would have approved. Claire visited unexpectedly. No agenda, no game. Just wine. Silence. They sat across from each other like chess players who had removed the board. "You didn't need to do that," she said finally. "I didn't do anything. That's what scares me." Elias watched the reflection of the city in her glass. "Fear is clarity arriving too late," he said. She looked at him differently now, not as a rival, as a warning. Claire had built her power on anticipation, reading rooms, shaping narratives, staying one move ahead. Elias didn't move ahead. He stepped outside. You cannot predict someone who is not trying to win. She asked the question she had avoided. What happens when someone like you loses? Elias didn't answer immediately. Loss implied attachment, He had trained himself beyond that. I would observe, then adjust. That's not loss. No, he agreed. It's adaptation. Later, alone again, Elias wrote another note in the margins of Machiavelli's book. Those who fear loss are already owned. Ownership was invisible. That was its power. People thought they were free because no one was holding the leash. They never noticed the collar was internal. The world teaches obedience through consequence. Elias had learned dominance through absence of consequence. When nothing touched him, nothing controlled him. That was the final layer most never reached. Outside, the city pulsed. Inside, Elias felt something rare. Not satisfaction, not pride. Alignment. The internal silence that comes when desire no longer negotiates with fear. He was becoming dangerous in a way no one could name. And unnamed dangers are the hardest to confront. Far below, lives collided. Emotions burned. Egos clashed. Elias watched without judgment. From this height, chaos looked almost elegant. If you're still listening, you're already ahead of most people.
Power eventually demands a price, not from those who chase it, but from those who carry it effortlessly. Elias discovered this when the silence began to push back. It wasn't external pressure, no threats, no resistance. It was internal, a subtle erosion of sensation. Victory no longer produced relief. Clarity no longer produced satisfaction. Detachment, once a weapon, had begun to harden into a state of being. And states, unlike tactics, are difficult to exit. Machiavelli never warned about this. He wrote about how to gain power, how to maintain it, how to survive enemies. He never wrote about what happens after power stops reacting, after dominance becomes default, after the world bends so often that resistance feels nostalgic. Claire noticed the change before Elias did. "You're disappearing," she said one evening. They stood on opposite sides of a private balcony overlooking Manhattan. The city looked artificial from this height, like a simulation running too smoothly. "I'm still here," Elias replied. She shook her head. "No, you're functioning. That's different." Functioning was efficient. Existence was optional. Elias had optimized himself out of vulnerability, and vulnerability, he was beginning to realize, was where sensation lived. The next challenge didn't arrive as a person, it arrived as an event, a crisis large enough to ignore individuals, a sudden market collapse triggered by something no one controlled, algorithmic panic, geopolitical ambiguity, digital rumor accelerating faster than truth. Boards panicked. Executives demanded certainty. They turned to Elias, not for answers, for stillness. People borrow calm when they lack it. Elias studied the data. Then he closed the screen. "This won't be solved," he said quietly. "It will be endured." The room resisted. Solutions are comforting. Endurance is not. But endurance was honest. He recommended restraint, minimal intervention, strategic silence. Let others overcorrect. Let fear reveal weak structures. They followed him, not because they trusted him, because no one else seemed untouched. The strategy worked. Losses stabilized. Competitors imploded under urgency. Elias's organization emerged intact, stronger, untouched. And yet, Elias felt nothing. No relief, no triumph, just confirmation. That night, alone again, he confronted an uncomfortable realization. Power had solved every external problem, but it had emptied the internal landscape. When nothing threatens you, meaning begins to evaporate. Fear gives life its edges. Without edges, everything blurs. Claire arrived unannounced, again. "You're right," she said one evening. "You are always right." That wasn't admiration, it was mourning. "You don't even feel it, do you?" Elias didn't lie. "No." "That's the cost," she said softly. "Complete dominance sterilizes experience." Elias considered this. Machiavelli had written that it is safer to be feared than loved. He never asked whether either was worth it. Claire stepped closer. "For years," she said, "power was the ability to shape others." She looked directly at him. "But you've gone further." "How so?" "You've shaped yourself out of reach." Out of reach, out of pain, out of desire, out of life. Elias felt something then, not emotion, recognition. He had built a fortress so perfect that even he could not leave it. Later, alone, Elias returned to the margins of The Prince. He read his own notes. They felt written by someone else. You can master distance, he realized, but distance mastered you in return. Dominance had one final paradox. The moment you no longer need control, you no longer know what to do with freedom. He wrote again, slower this time. "Power protects you from others, but it isolates you from yourself." The realization didn't weaken him, it clarified the final stage. Because true mental dominance was not detachment, that was only phase one. The final mastery was choice, the ability to step back into vulnerability without losing control, to feel without attachment, to engage without surrender. That was a level Machiavelli never reached. Elias closed the book. Outside, the city continued. Inside, something shifted. Not collapse, not awakening, decision. He would test the final boundary, not against enemies, not against systems, but against the only force he had never confronted: meaning. And meaning, unlike people, cannot be manipulated.
Meaning does not announce itself. It resists extraction. Elias learned this the hard way by trying to treat it like every other variable. He approached it cautiously, the way one approaches fire after mastering water. He did not chase purpose, he observed it, watched how others spoke of it with desperation disguised as conviction. Most people did not want meaning, they wanted relief. Relief from uncertainty, relief from insignificance, relief from the terrifying freedom of choosing without guarantees. Meaning was simply the story they told themselves afterward. Elias tested vulnerability experimentally, small exposures, controlled risks. He spoke honestly once, just once in a meeting, not strategically, not defensively, honestly. The room shifted, not with respect, with confusion. Honesty disrupted the gravity he had cultivated. It made him legible, and legibility invited expectation. He withdrew immediately. The lesson was clear. Exposure creates hooks. Hooks create leverage. Meaning demanded openness, and openness threatened immunity. Claire saw the conflict before he articulated it. "You're standing at the edge of something," she said. "An illusion," Elias replied. "No," she corrected, "a choice." Choice implied cost. Every system Elias had mastered worked because it minimized cost. Meaning demanded payment in advance with no promise of return.
They walked through the city late at night. No destination, just movement. For the first time in years, Elias allowed conversation without steering it. Claire spoke of exhaustion, not physical, existential. "I'm tired of being effective," she said. "It's not the same as being alive." Elias listened, not analytically. That alone felt dangerous. At the edge of the river, Claire stopped. "Do you know what scares people about you?" she asked. "That I don't react," Elias replied. "No," she said, "that nothing seems to matter to you." Matter. The word landed differently. Elias had removed detachment to avoid manipulation. In doing so, he had amputated significance. That night, Elias didn't open Machiavelli. He didn't need to. He had surpassed him. Machiavelli taught how to survive power. Elias had learned how to outgrow it, and outgrowing something always feels like loss. He understood now. Mental dominance is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear dictate meaning. Detachment is a tool, not a destination. Silence is power until it becomes escape. Elias made his final adjustment, not externally, internally. He allowed himself selective vulnerability, not confession, not surrender, presence. He chose where to care, where to feel, where to engage, not because he needed it, but because he could afford it. That was the final asymmetry. Claire noticed the difference immediately. "You're different," she said. "No," Elias replied. "I'm deliberate." Deliberate vulnerability is not weakness, it is controlled exposure, the rarest form of strength. In time, Elias stepped back, not into obscurity, into irrelevance by design. He left no disciples, no manifesto, no doctrine. Those who tried to imitate him failed. They copied the silence, but not the discipline behind it. Years later, someone would ask about Elias Crow. There would be no clear answer, only outcomes, only traces. That was intentional. True mental dominance leaves no signature. The final truth Elias accepted was simple and brutal. If you can control people, you are powerful. If you can control yourself, you are dangerous. If you can choose when not to control either, you are free. The city never noticed his departure. Power rarely does. But the silence he left behind felt different. Not empty, complete.